Hey there, it's Camo. So for those who have been watching my previous videos on New World and in general in most MMOs, I've usually played range classes, like whether it's a mage or a bow, but usually I like to be a kitey class that's at range. And so over the years I've developed really good situational awareness, so I'm able to keep myself out of trouble really effectively, and that's enabled me to burn people down and nuke them really quickly and do a lot of damage. So I'll always be quite high up on the damage meters. I think the downside of that though is that because it's almost like a double-edged sword, because I've been so good at keeping out of trouble, or when I get into trouble, just kiting and staying away from them, is that I've never really developed the skills around dueling very strongly. I wouldn't say I'm bad, but I'm definitely pretty average. And so I want to improve on my dueling, and so I was wanting to make a video series where I could sort of track from the very beginning of being a average to bad dueler to, hopefully becoming a good dueler. So what I wanted to do was, rather than taking it from a range class, I thought I would rather try to learn to duel properly with a melee class. Despite being somewhat subpar at dueling and especially as a melee, what I like about it is that I feel that as a melee that duels, you need to be a lot more aware of what the opponent is doing and how to counter that. And I feel like it's a lot more engaging and rewarding. I feel like maybe I'm just better, and it's more natural for me to be kiting, but it's gotten to the sort of point where I feel like, I'm running away and I'm shooting at them, and obviously you need to counter some of their attacks, but it's not quite to the same degree as if you're playing a melee. And then this gets even more so when you're playing a melee in the battlefield, so like say in Opera Rush or in the open world. So in an Opera or the battlefield, I feel like as a melee class, you need to be consciously aware of micro and macro factors, whereas I feel on a range class, you need to be more focused on the macro and you don't need to necessarily worry about the micro. So what I mean by that is, with macro, you really just need to be aware of making sure that you're keeping your distance from the enemies and making sure they don't get close. So if they start to push towards you, you move back. If they start to pull away, you move forward with them. Whereas with a melee class, you're right on the front line. So it's like there's a lot happening on that front line that you need to be aware of, which is sort of more micro factors, whilst also being aware of the macro factors. So some of the things, like for example, what you need to be aware of is, when do you push into their big groups and do the big damage, knowing that once you're in the front line, you can easily get caught out and stunned and killed as a melee, whereas you can still be doing damage from range from far away. And also, when do you need to pull out and get safe? So when things are when the battle tide is starting to turn, and you need to pick up on that a lot more quickly as a melee. You need to be paying attention to things like where the heals are getting placed, so that you can take a lot of damage while also still doing damage. You want to be looking for little pockets where you're not the one getting overwhelmed by 5 of their players, but you're the one overwhelming their kind of lone players with 5 of your own players, so you can bully them down and kill them. And other things like, do you want to bully their healers and try to keep pressure on them so they're not able to heal and so their group falls apart? I mean, basically, I'm just really interested in trying melee. So I've re-leveled a new character to 60 on Utopia, which is a bigger server with more numbers. I just wanted to start from afresh. So this series will be tracking me as I come to grips with playing the melee class, doing lots of duels, figuring out things that I learn along the way, how to improve, and hopefully go from being, semi-okay to somewhat decent. So on day one, the first thing I noticed I've got another character on Delos with a better gear score and better expertise. So the first thing I noticed upon leveling the character, so day one, ground zero, was just how damn squishy and how little damage you did. with 500 expertise and basically 500 gear score. You can see in this video how I feel this was a little later in the piece, and you can see that I'm getting more attacks off than they are. I'm dodging a lot of their big attacks, whereas I'm getting my attacks off. I'm not saying that I'm playing perfectly here, but you can also see that just how little damage I'm doing to them, and the attacks that they're getting off on me, they're obviously doing a lot more. So you're really fighting an uphill battle when you've got 500 expertise, 500 gear score against someone who's got better gear. And so then it becomes even more important. So then it becomes even more important to focus on those factors that I've just mentioned, the macro and micro factors. Also just using your teammates to survive a lot more, standing in where the heals have been placed, pushing in when your team's pushing in, and making sure that you pull away well before the opponent gets there. You can see in this video, I'm pushing in where my teammates are and where the heals are. And so we're kind of focusing on this opponent, and then I see running beside me a lot of their players, and so I have to make that quick decision. It's pretty obvious that there's Zergs arrive, so I quickly get out of there and push around so that I don't get swamped. So it's just kind of paying attention to things like that so that you don't get overrun. It becomes more and more important because you're just so squishy. So dueling wise, one of the first things I realized was that I was rushing my attacks a lot. So every time I got near an opponent, I'd try to get the attack off, and 80% of the time I was missing. So after doing that for a while, I realized that I just needed to slow down and be a little bit more strategical and not rush the attacks just because I'm close. But one of the things I did learn that you can see in this video is this is the first duel I had, this is actually with my guild leader, this is the first time he's played a bow, but one of the things I realized is that as I was rushing him, I was dodging from side to side, and I was also weaving from side to side. So there was quite a bit of time that he gained from me by doing that. So you can see, as we did multiple duels that he beat me, but this is the one where I kind of figured out a little bit like, rather than dodging from side to side, dodge at him. So you can start to see me not weaving from side to side and dodging from side to side, but actually dodging straight at him and trying to decrease the time it took for me to get from point A to point B. So that puts the bow person under a lot more pressure because they have less time to react. As a bow player, I know that the difference when someone's coming straight at you versus going from side to side, the amount of pressure you get is a lot harder, and it's harder to make those decisions quickly. So you can kind of see here, I'm putting him under more pressure, I'm being a lot more effective and dodging his attack straight at him, and yeah, I basically win that duel. One of the other things I noticed was to really watch my opponent more. You can see here I go to attack him and he does the riposte, and I still hit him anyway, and then he just does a massive amount of damage to me. You can also see here that I try to go for my shockwave, but he's smart enough to stay out of that, which is another thing you really need to be aware of when you're fighting an opponent. And so it's these sorts of things that I'm being really careful of and trying to learn the opponent's moves so that I can avoid taking their damage. The good news is this is the same duel as I just showed you, where I took all that damage from the riposte quite early on, and you can see that at the start I wasn't really paying attention to what my opponent was doing, and so I was taking a lot of damage, and he was definitely dominating in the fight. But at about 2/3 of my health being gone, so already at half my health missing, and he's just pulled off that one combo. But towards the end, where I've actually taken a lot of damage, I start to, obviously because my health's low, I start paying a lot more attention to what he's doing and trying to counter for that and trying to make sure that I don't take the damage. And so I actually end up coming back and winning the duel. So it's about now that I start paying attention. So yeah, I'll just let you watch the rest of the duel. But essentially from here on in, I'm trying to pay more attention to what he's doing. And I guess that's what I'm really, really enjoying about dueling. I'm not, as I've said, I'm no expert, but I'm hoping to get a lot better and better. So here I'm fighting a player, and they absolutely just wreck me. And this is like my third fight with them. And, you know, sometimes you'll fight people 10 times and just lose. And you can just see, like, I've just got nothing, and he just absolutely wrecks me. But in the next fight, I actually figure him out a little bit and pick up on some tactics on how to beat him. And I turn it around and actually win the duel. And I think that's what I really, really enjoy about dueling is, you know, figuring out how to beat your opponents. Especially as a melee, where you're going to be, you know, you have to really work on how to counter them, and how to outmaneuver them, etc. And that's why I'm really glad I'm doing the melee. And so the take-home message is I'm still losing a lot of my duels, and that can be really frustrating sometimes, especially when you've lost to the same person 10 or 20 times. But having said that, it feels so amazing when you figure them out and can beat them. So I think I need to learn and practice a lot more. I've still been putting in a bit of time, but I want to put in a lot more time so I can get that learning curve really going up. So it definitely takes commitment to be really good in dueling. But one of the things I did notice too was I could go lose to a whole bunch of people, you know, 10 times in a row, and feel really frustrated about that. But then go into an OPR and absolutely smack the crap out of them, getting off all my combos really easy, and just killing a lot of people. So I think that's because, you know, duelers are obviously really good at it, good at avoiding damage, but most people that go into OPR don't. So it's worth dueling because even if you're losing all the time, you're still picking stuff up. So I still think it's really, really worth it to do dueling. So I'm really enjoying the melee style, and I hope to make more videos as I progress through my journey to becoming, first of all, average, and then second of all, hopefully good. I also really, really need to gear up. I'm still running on low expertise and low gear score, so that's something that I will be working on as well at the same time. But hopefully you enjoyed this series, and if you've made it to the end, you obviously liked it a lot, so maybe consider subscribing so you can get the rest of the videos as they come in and watch my journey.